than firms that merely allocate resources without specific strategic goals. The allocation of adequate financial resources to specific technology objectives is essential to success. High technology firms successfully executing turnaround strategies may reduce some resources, but they do not reduce research and development spending. Senior management needs to be aware of the objectives of various sources of funding. Firms must install reasonable controls to avoid excessive spending that would waste scarce funds. A technology with a low introductory investment, along with the possibility of incremental expansion, has a more favorable outlook of adoption. This is the case with the current internet technology. The introductory investment can be relatively small. Organizations can gain experience and decide on later expansion. Jeffrey Smith will explain how later in this broadcast. There is a need for what I call a complete organization. In order to compete successfully in the emerging technology environment, organizations will need to develop the capability to integrate human assets, senior leadership, and resources into effective systems. Skilled human assets are necessary to provide technical expertise. However, if senior leadership is not sufficiently adaptable, the technology will not be implemented, or the technology may be implemented in name only, and the full benefits not achieved. Sometimes a technology can demand too much change and overwhelm or bypass an organization if the organization is too inflexible. In some cases, a technology can affect strongly held values, and organizations and societies may choose to limit the technology's implementation and impact. How should an organization proceed in implementing today's technologies? I will discuss implementation in terms of organizational culture and management goals. My colleague, Jeffrey Smith, will discuss it in more technical detail. First, an organization should seek expertise. It should initially engage outside experts, either in the form of new employees or as consultants. However, an organization will need to develop an internal capability, perhaps through new employees, but also through training of current employees. Most organizations will use a combination of outside experts and internal employee development. The organization should be prepared to tolerate ambiguity. Tight specification of the project will not be possible in the early stages of the project, nor will accurate cost-benefit analysis be available. This does not mean the project should not be defined clearly, but to recognize that these definitions will be redefined as experience with the internet technology is accumulated. The organization should strive for consensus with qualifications. Informed discussion with interested parties should take place. However, in order to move forward, decisions will need to be made before complete understanding or certainty is achieved. Managers will need to set challenging but achievable goals and timetables. Managers should also look outside the organization to examine new developments. New technological developments may be of interest. Managers should also review other organizations' applications for innovations to be incorporated in their own organization's applications. Of particular interest will be competitors' applications, but successful organizations in other areas should also be investigated. Lastly, the organization should learn, demonstrate, and expand. Successful organizations in the emerging technology environment will find themselves in a pattern of learning new skills and abilities, demonstrating the applicability of the technology to their organization, and then expanding the application within their organization. The process will then be repeated as the organization continues to develop and expand its capability to participate and compete in the emerging global technology environment. Thank you.
Let's begin the first question and answer session. We will try to answer as many questions as possible. Therefore, we ask that only one question be asked per phone call, and that these questions be as brief as possible. You may call the studio directly at the phone numbers or fax, which now appear on your screen. We remind you to make your phone calls at a distance from the monitor to avoid feedback. We have a fax to begin with from the Federación Nacional de Comerciantes in Medellín, Colombia. The question that they have for our experts is, why do you feel two-way communication is so important in a high-technology environment?
With the new high-technology environments are so complex that no one can master all of them. And so people will have to specialize in the technology. But these human assets that have this expertise also require direction from senior management in order to ensure that they're serving the needs of the organization.
Yes.
Yes, Jeff?
Yeah, I'd like to add that when you're dealing with electronic communications, you're not always in the same room with the person. In fact, you're often in a remote location, as we are today. And so you don't have the opportunity for feedback and body language and personal contact. And so having your technology in a way that provides as much of that feedback as possible really improves the communication.
We have an experience of two-way communication right now. We have a phone call from the Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Mexico in Coacalco, Mexico. Welcome. Your question, please.
Good morning, Doctor. We are the Hispano-American University. What type of companies have been approached by a greater number of universities on the Internet, and what kind of aspects do they deal with? Thank you.
Good.
Well, I think that what you're seeing is a partnership between the university community and the business community that we really haven't seen in the past with the introduction of the Internet into the commercial marketplace. I think it's not so much that universities are approaching businesses, but businesses now can approach universities to get research information and tap the experts at the university, and of course track local talent or university talent for possible recruiting, as the Internet is also used for jobs and so on.
In particular, I think the high technology companies that are trying to attract the individuals that are computer illiterate and are operating on the Internet and using it are the companies we most see approaching us.
We have another call now from Mexico, from the Instituto Tecnológico Superior de Apatzingán in Michoacán. Your question, please.
Voy a pedir que se retire. The question asked by the Instituto Tecnológico de Apatzingán is, what is the most appropriate option to have access to the Internet if the company is one that has scarce resources?
Okay, Larry?
I think
Sure.
either way.
Yeah, there's a number of ways to connect to the Internet. In fact, you can get a copy of last year's program. I did a seminar on the Internet. Communication can come from dial-up modems at low speed, or they can come from high-speed trunks that connect local area networks that service a university at a higher speed out to the Internet. There's a number of ways to connect to the Internet, and primarily it's based on what's available with in-country service. If you don't have very much resources, the most likely scenario would be to just use a dial-up modem that comes with your computer that allows you to talk at the Internet at a low speed, and then when you build up the traffic and you find uses for the application, then you can go for higher speed type transmissions.
I would agree with that.
We have a call now from Guadalajara, Universidad de Guadalajara, Centro Universitario de la Costa in Jalisco. Welcome. Your question, please.
Yes, good morning, doctor. This is Ramon González Lomelí from the Puerto Vallarta campus from Mismaloya. My question is, how important is the investment in hardware compared with the investment in software when we're beginning our technological information strategy? And what percentages should be assigned to each of these two?
Hardware versus software.
Well, you need them both. If you don't have one or the other. The thing to keep in mind here, too, is invest in the human or the personnel expertise so that they can use it. That's often overlooked. You'll have to balance the two with hardware and software. But probably you want to have sufficient software to use the hardware. The hardware becomes cheaper every year, every month. But we also have to remember to invest in the human assets.
Yes, I would agree with that. I think the key point here is to think of, if you're talking about a computer or an advanced piece of technology, that you approach it from the standpoint of an integrated system that meets a certain need of the organization. And as such, the software and the hardware work together to solve that problem. So you don't want to think of it in terms of just percentages. You want to think of it as they come together.
Yeah. We have a call from Argentina now, the Instituto Universidad Empresa, Universidad Blas Pascal in Córdoba. Welcome. Your question, please.
Given that technological knowledge is a requirement in order to implement these types of systems, it is a little difficult to acquire that technology. It's a little difficult for management to acquire that technology. Do you have any kind of experience where management is motivated so that they in turn will seek out this type of knowledge?
Often management will see these ideas or see competitors or other companies that they look to, that they benchmark against, that are using the technology, and will bring it back and say, how can we best use this? Management may not have the expertise, and they don't need to have the expertise on the details of the technology, but they could need to make the commitment to use the technology.
Key word. Commitment's the key word. If senior management gives you the commitment, then the rest of the elements, the resources and the technology, will follow from that commitment.
Can you convince key management that it's their idea and they get enthused? Are there tricks to that?
I think you've hit on a very important one. When what you want to do early on in the strategic planning process is to involve them in that planning process, to show them how this technology will benefit the organization, whether it's make a profit, improve productivity, or enhance your learning resources. So the key here is to involve management early in the process, rather than go away into an ivory tower and come up with a plan and present to them and they don't understand what you're bringing to them, is bring them in early on. And you might do that by coming up with non-technical strategic goals that management can understand, and then say that we're going to solve those kinds of problems or enhance productivity, like we're going to be a technical community resource. Now that's something senior management can understand, and then you show them how the technology will do that. So if you can bring them into the concept, then I think you can achieve the commitment.
Sometimes I think in this case, if you can do it on an incremental basis, iterative basis, you take small steps and convince them that it works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a key one.
We have a call now from Brazil, our friends there at Key TV Comunicaciones in Rio de Janeiro. Welcome. Your question, please.
Dr. Lawrence Rhyne, I think you were too general on your presentation. I would like to go down to more specific question. For instance, I would like to put the former question, a comment between the interfacing between the senior management, R&D personnel, engineering, and marketing. As you know, two different vectors works in this environment. First, the so-called market pull, where the need for technology comes straight from the market. And the second, the so-called technology push, where you're going to push the technology towards the marketing. So I would like if you could make comments on these interfaces between the senior management, R&D personnel, engineering, and marketing.
These are a complex group who have very different agendas. Ideally, what we would like to find is a market pull or an unmet need that we link with a technology push where we solve that need by applying the technology. That's the ideal situation. In more situations, we may find that we have a technology that we would like to apply and we have to find a need, and in which case we will probably look for those users who are most adaptive, who are willing to try new things, and begin to show them how this can solve a need that they may not have even realized, but this is a real challenge in high technology. We didn't know we had to have a PC on our desks in order to operate only 15 years ago. We now switch it on the first time we walk into the office. So sometimes we need to show people how the technology can solve their problems, and as they develop that experience, we develop the market pull.
We just had one of our faculty members teach engineers about the integration of telecommunication systems, and it was a struggle because the perspective is so different. The engineers were the micro level, the detail, the yes. equipment, and they generally said they had not seen the larger system perspective. On the other hand, the system people need the detail people, so it's a continuous mutual education process, yes. in my experience, that takes time, and you can't ignore it. We have a question now from Mexico, from the Comisión Federal de Electricidad in Auditorio Atoyac. Welcome. Your question, please.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Las mejores innovaciones que se han dado no son solamente
best innovations that have been seen are not only given through highly qualified personnel. There are two elements that one should consider: experience and interdisciplinary groups. What is your opinion insofar as interdisciplinary groups as an element of success in implementing new technologies? Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, we found this is very important. We find that an interdisciplinary group that can work together is a real critical success factor, a real distinctive competence. It is difficult to achieve that, but when the groups can do it, as we just, for the previous question of the different engineering and marketing and senior management, when they can come together and have true communication, that's when we find we have a real advantage.
I'd like to add that in many companies, one of the things that we recommend is a formulation of a enterprise-wide or a campus-wide steering committee made up of representatives from each of the divisions or departments. And that committee is chaired either by the president of the institution or the chief information officer at a very high level that has an enterprise-wide view of how to implement the technologies. Because quite frankly, there's a lot of refereeing to do between the departments. Each department, as the doctor said here, have their own agendas, and these need to be balanced with the overall effectiveness of the organization as a whole. So I think it's very important to establish this, and we found that if senior management supports a steering committee such as this, that it tends to be productive.
We have a call now from Peru, from the Universidad Nacional de Ingeniería, in Lima. Welcome. Your question, please.
Gracias.
Thank you.
En relación
In regard, le voy a pedir que se retire de la pantalla.
Y bancarias a través de Internet, desearíamos conocer su comentario acerca de el nivel de seguridad y compatibilidad
Of safety and compatibility insofar as the situation that I just mentioned. Le voy a pedir que repita.
level of safety and compatibility that one needs to be concerned with in these systems?
Yes, I think one of the things, the way to look at that when you think about safety is in a larger context of an organizational asset protection strategy. This can include physical security of the equipment. It can include your network security, protection from hackers and invaders of systems, and of course your antivirus program to protect your machines from people bringing diseased programs to your enterprise. Mm-hmm. So you want to look at it and it can also include a disaster recovery program where if you lose your data center or your campus network that you can still function at least with your critical systems. So all of this needs to be thought of at an enterprise-wide level from both security, antivirus, and physical protection as an overall strategy and part of your long-range plan.
We have a call now from Panama, from the Universidad Tecnológica de Panama. Welcome. Your question, please.
Yes. Good morning. We're calling from the Universidad Autónoma from Aguascalientes. What is the profile and professional origin of those individuals who are in charge of managing technology, and what kind of academic background should they have?
The background and qualifications. A question from Aguascalientes.
Yes. Probably one thing they should have, and I don't have this as I bring this, is a technical background, that they have credibility. This will give them a great deal of credibility with the technologists that they're working with. But above that, they have to have a personality that will listen to what the technologists and other people are bringing to them to try to understand the issues. And that's probably even more important than any particular academic training. One of the most effective entrepreneurs in the past 20 years, both Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, don't have a college degree. And yet they were able to lead technologists and motivate them to great success. So it's that being able, both of those people are known for listening and asking lots of questions.
Mm-hmm. We have a call now from Argentina, from the Municipalidad de Huinca Renanco in Provincia de Córdoba. Welcome. Your question, please.
Good morning, San Diego. We would like to know up to what point can the information network system grow to without decreasing its efficiency and level of safety? And is there any type of mechanism that can limit its use in order to avoid oversaturation? Thank you.
Well, that's quite a question. I think the way you want to look at that is that you want to build what we call scalable networks, so that you don't, as you begin to run up against the ceiling of your existing network, that you've implemented technology that you can add to your network incrementally as either your funding or your usage or your resources permit. But the idea is to develop a strategy, and I think of it often as a jigsaw puzzle, where even though the funding may be ad hoc, or your environmental planning may be ad hoc, or the user community may operate in that fashion with their requests, that does not mean that your strategic plan for your network is in an ad hoc way. So the way it is if you have your design put together, then when you have the funding for the next piece, you can put it right in, you know where it goes. And I don't think there's so much a point of, if you want to think of it this way, you probably want to run at about 80 to 85% capacity. That optimizes the resources, and the network equipment itself will perform best at that level. If you go above that without enhancing your network, then you will go into a degraded state in which the systems that manage the traffic flow will degrade and process. They'll be so busy processing I/O interrupts that they will thrash themselves right into a lockup state. So the way to think about this, without getting too technically in detail here, is to think of it as that you run at about 80 to 85% capacity. You set yourself up for scalable upgrades as required. so that you don't lock yourself into technology that can't be expanded as needed. As far the other aspect of that, if you cannot add anything to your network, is to have an aggressive system administration campaign to keep spurious files and unnecessary traffic off the various equipments that go into. An example might be, let's say that you have a VAX on your campus as your mainframe computer, and it also processes your mail programs. Well, that system may become very loaded, so what you might do is take a very low-cost computer, make it a mail server, and take all that traffic off that computer and put it on that little mail server dedicated processor, and you've enhanced the system life of your data center, and you've improved the processing of your mail. So it's a very long answer to this question. It basically means that you do a technology plan that factors all those things in.
Mm-hmm. We have a call now from Panama. We hope we get through this time the right one. The Universidad Tecnológica de Panama. Welcome. Your question, please.
Yes, good morning. I'm calling from Santiago, Panama. What can we do in order to change the traditional way of doing business, that is face-to-face, and incorporate an internet-based environment where resources are very important, especially insofar as developing countries?
Okay.
This is an extremely difficult question. I think that perhaps what you try to do here is do it in small steps. You don't immediately convert from your previous system. If possible, you meet people on a face-to-face basis and then begin to do business on the internet. Or you begin to develop a relationship on the internet with people that you have experience with in small steps, and that you begin to develop that trust in that.
Yeah, I think you want to think of the internet as a tool to use in business, just like a telephone or the video conferencing equipment that we're using here today. You want to think of I always prefer the initial meetings with the customer to be face-to-face, to get to know them and understand how they want to operate. And then after that, within the context of that personal contact, then you can implement the technology. But I've always felt that if I know who what the person is on the other end, what that person looks like, and how they kind of look at the world, it helps improve my electronic communications with them.
We have a call now from the Universidad Autónoma de Tamaulipas in Ciudad Victoria, Tamaulipas. Welcome. Your question, please.
Yes, my question is the following. What repercussions do mistakes made in the implementation phase, and what is the tolerance level for these types of mistakes? Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there are some mistakes that you will invariably make some mistakes with implementing a new technology as you learn from them. If these are reasonable mistakes, that you can understand that the decision making had a logic to it, this is fine. And you go on and learn from those and improve. There are some fatal mistakes that have been made on the implementation of technology, which have had serious repercussions. I think by taking an incremental approach and moving into it slowly and learning as you go is the best approach to avoid serious mistakes.
Yes, I'd like to add there that mistakes that hurt the most are mistakes in infrastructure. For example, if you completely wire your campus and you don't put enough wires in the ground or enough fiber optic cable in the ground to support what might happen over the next 10 to 15 years, then you have to come back and re-engineer and retrofit that network, and that's very expensive. It's much easier to put it in right the first time in terms of the amount of bandwidth that you lay there. Even if you're not going to use it for the next 2 to 3 years, it's very expensive to go back and redo all that later. I think also that I agree with Dr. Lawrence here that implementing a sort of a small subset of the system or a rapid prototype of the system to get everybody to sort of understand how this system will impact them. Because one of the mistakes that's most commonly made is that people underestimate the impact on the operation in the current environment. And all of a sudden now the users are thrown into this new complex environment they need to function, and they're not adequately trained, or they don't understand what all they're doing, what it really means to manage the program. So I guess the best way to look at it is manage your infrastructure carefully and plan well on that in the future, and introduce your systems slowly so that people can assimilate them.
We have a call now from the Universidad Autónoma de Baja California Sur in La Paz. Welcome. Your question, please.
Sí, muy buenos días.
Yes, le voy a pedir que se retire de la pantalla.
¿Por qué es importante el dominio? ¿Por qué es importante
Question is,
el dominio del idioma inglés
why is
para la toma de
speaking
decisiones?
English so important in the decision-making process when implementing high technology in any given organization?
A language question.
Language question. Well, like it or not, American English has become the dominant language of international business. Most of the internet is based on American English. A high portion of it, or the protocols, were set in the United States, and this has become the dominant language. I don't know that that is correct or what it should be, but that's where we are.
Yeah, I think that you want to look at where does the leadership in the industry come from, and it comes from Microsoft and Intel and IBM and Apple Computer, and all of those companies are located in the United States, at least headquartered here. If you look at probably one of the thing that drives the market the most, which a lot of people don't understand, is that software drives the market, because it's how you use